Yo, yo, yo. We're doing it again, boys. Didn't even prepare. Oh, yeah, I did. Here we go. Here we go. Age 109 finals. Smiles. This is me ranting. See how it goes. Blah, 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 blah. Nothing interesting on the preamble here. This is essentially the same preamble from the revised. It's very full of adjectives and flavor text. Right. Straight to general mechanics. Hostility meter. Failing a raise attack will generate 3 meter points. So this only increases the meter given by bouncing out of war between like 50 and 100%, depending on the type of bounce. So it's not too bad. It does, however, mean you can give each other buttons by bouncing single soldiers with your mystics, or your TMs in general, I suppose. So I'm not sure if that was the intent of it, but now everyone can give ops really easily. So in a way, this will potentially make starting wars easier with people. That or people are going to make, war clauses that you have to hit X times with successful attacks or some nonsense. People have the weirdest ways they want to start wars. I prefer just pew pew, Defender casualties on failed attacks minus 35%. I think that's a fine change. It makes bouncing a little slow, so I don't think we'll see too much of it on anyone, really. If you're completely unprepared for bounces, you're still at risk. If you build a lot of mitigation, you can still bounce pretty cheaply. So I think that's a pretty good middle ground. I sort of liked increased losses on the attacker instead, but I'll allow it. It's tough. I think it might be a bit much. It might just make it so, if the opponent has literally anything going for them, they're basically impossible to bounce, but we'll see. We'll see. Mentor change, we've gone over. Learns, we've gone over. Learns are basically unchanged. Mentors, I'm pretty sure that they can't do that as a balance change, so David's just going to poo-poo it or something. Racial abilities, I'll explain as we go. We go into races. Actually, I wanted to do a little something different here, and I wanted to go over the TMs first. And I was going to skip DE when it came to considering what's a TM, but maybe I'll include it. Elf, we have 25% WPA, minus 20% casualties. We've got Chastity, Mist, Pitfall's Wrath. Did they always have Mist? I don't remember. Mana Well, when activated, you gain 50% mana, cooldown 24 Utopian days. So in a perfect world, that's like having plus 2 mana per tick. So if you compare that to Last Age's Elf, maybe you got a little bit more casualties. They did have Mist. But you're basically gaining plus 2 mana, or plus 1 mana over Last Age's Elf. Now, at the same time, I didn't see very many successful pure elves last age. I think that was because of their 10-point D-spec. Now we have an 11-point D-spec. And they even got buffed on military wages a bit. So, my impression is that elves are very strong, and you should look at them as your first choice for TMs next stage. I think elf has potential roles also in some core positions, but I'm not super in love with them as core, but I think it's doable, so don't discount them. Fairy, essentially unchanged from last age. We have mana per tick in war. We've got the same duration bonuses. We have the exact same military and military costs. Same penalty. But our new passive is you now have Perfect Mystic Vortex, removing all spells in one cast. So this is an extremely strong defensive and offensive tool. I think it's almost required that you have a Mystic or two in your kingdom. Even if you prefer other TMs, I would say you should have a Fairy Mystic in your kingdom always, if for no other reason than Mystic Vortex. It's going to help against Clear Sight, it's going to help against all the clerics you see, it's going to be great against humans. You can use it on your own kingdom quite effectively. Say you have a bunch of goblins that take bonus damage from meteor showers, you can intra Mystic Vortex. I see a lot of good options for Mystic Vortex being a crazy useful spell. Fairy to fairy, you can make the enemy fairies recast this huge list of self-spells. So while the numbers and spells and everything else of fairies unchanged, they do have this new tool, which is awesome. Looking at this spell list, it looks about the same. It's got everything you want. You've got Mage's Fury. The only spell I don't see in this list is Invis. So if that's true, that's actually a fairly modest nerf to Fairy. Yeah, I don't see it. So actually, that is a modest nerf to Fairy, and Fairy was quite strong last stage. So keep that in mind. No Invis means that Thief power is going to be a little bit tighter, a little bit tougher. Last age is a Fairy Mystic. I usually only ran 3.5 TPA with like 5 to 10% TD, and I did rely quite a bit on that Invis to carry me, so keep that in mind. That is a modest nerf to Fairy, if nothing else, but everything else on the spell list looks pretty good and normal. So last age, Fairy defense was pretty strong, unchanged. We still have greater protection. Fairy's looking pretty good. Elf looking very good. Fairy looking very good. Halfling. Halfling took a bit of a nerf this time around. We have the same birth rate penalty, which I didn't even remember was in the game last stage, and I had halflings, so shows what I know. The main difference here, we have, same TPA, same elite. The main difference is we've got an extra 5% population, so we've gone from 10 to 15, and it's at the cost of your D-spec. I guess it's also at the cost of your O-spec, but at the cost of your D-spec. So normally I would say that 5% population is worth plus or minus 1 defense, but when you already have population and it's -1 from a 10, it's a little bit worse. I think this actually hits Halfling a fair bit harder than people expect. You also have the military wages. Not huge, but not nothing. So I'd say that Halfling's actually taking a nerf, and I wasn't blown away by Halfling last stage, so I could see Halfling struggling a fair bit. Now, you have Sneak Attack. This is an incredible bonus. Now, I'm sort of just assuming that your Halflings are always rogues, but incredible bonus. It's pretty rare for you to have 100 plus BE as a rogue for any extended period of time, which means you're always eating fairly substantial losses when you're max sending thieves. Even with 90% thieves' dens, it's still pretty tough. So, what does that mean? No losses. That's crazy value when it comes to doing riots, greater arson, but especially when doing propaganda and assassinate wizards. If you have unbreakable halflings, I think they're going to be incredibly strong, much stronger than normal. I think that their path to being unbreakable reliably is much harder this age, though, so it's a bit of a risk-reward play. Now, I mean, you're only on D-specs. gaining land's not that hard these days, so, you know, I think the recovery isn't too hard for halfling, but yeah. If you're in a safe position, this ability, if used well, is going to be very strong. Now, on the other hand, this population with the elite, you can actually field some fairly good offense with quick feet. So you can run this as a hybrid and get some really good Night Strike runs off while keeping your thieves alive if you're running something like a Heretic or a Mystic that still has problems with losing thieves. Sneak attack's going to do you really well. Yeah, something like a Halfling Mystic that doesn't really run Thieves' Dens. You're not getting ET cast on you much because you're a Mystic. You could save 24 hours of stealth and then do your full Night Strike run with 0 losses. So something like a Halfling Mystic, I think, could do quite well for similar reasons. But yeah, we're gonna see. Take a sip of my beverage. And then, because screw it, let's look at Dark Elf. Essentially unchanged from last age. We're actually nerfed on the O spec. We're actually nerfed on wages. We gained a spell. We gained Fool's Gold and Magic Ward. Nothing crazy. I mean, gaining Fool's Gold is great, but I believe it's also on Mystic. So the fact that Dark Elf gained Fool's Gold is essentially negated because Mystic also gets Fool's Gold. If instead Dark Elf just got Fool's Gold and no one else did, it would make Dark Elf a near must pick for a solo pick. They only really got that 10% bonus to magic effectiveness. Otherwise, they're unchanged, but actually with a nerfed offense. And then, of course, their unique ability is once a day, you get essentially plus 20% spell damage. This is only really effective for instant spells that you want to double cast. There's some situations where you could fail meteor showers and then the second double cast succeeds. That's not too significant. However, plus 20% damage is plus 20% damage. Now, if you have, say, 4 mana a tick because you're a Mystic, that's equivalent to 4.8 mana a tick in a perfect world, which compared to an Elf that's going to be 6 mana a tick in the same way, or a Fairy that's effectively 6.25 mana a tick when doing duration spells in war, it's not quite there. I think the Dark Elf is pretty weak. I'm just going to say it. I don't think it matches up to the other TMs at all. I don't think it matches up to other core at all. Sure, stacking some WPA with free casting does a lot for you, but you're attacking at the minimum speed. You've got the worst offense. You've got the worst defense. You're not doing any bonus damage. You're not negating or mitigating damage against you. You're paying bonus wages. Like, where's the benefit? I don't see it. I don't think it exists. I think outside of running 15 Dark Elf Nightmare casters and going for land, or picking one Dark Elf just to abolish ritual cheaply, that Dark Elf really has a place. We saw Dark Elf last age in several kingdoms as a hybrid. We saw it in Legacy and in Merciless, and they just got pooped on all age by all kingdoms. We saw a couple attempt to be pure in the later age. It went okay, but only if you already had the land size. Now, if you're running hybrid, sometimes you end with big land, so it does help, but I just don't see a place for Dark Elf. What was I gonna do here? My only Excel sheet. It's my master list. This looks like a nice empty page. So let's just go Elf, Halfling, Fairy. I'm going to assume something like 30 base pop per acre. So 30 MPA pop. This is going to be 34.5. Going to be 27. Let's standardize, say, 6 peons. Defense. 6 across the board. This is how I tend to do things. Just a little bit of Excel. You can do things pretty easily. We're going to assume, you know, let's say it's Elf Mystic, Halfling Rogue, Fairy Mystic. We're going to be like 4 TPA, 4 WPA, 5 TPA, 3 WPA, 3 TPA, 4 WPA. So that leaves 16 for defense. This leaves 20.5 for defense. And this leaves 14 for defense. So now all we really need to do is multiply the defense by the defense. So we've got 16 times 11. My mic and my camera are a little in the way of my keyboard, so this is why this is a little awkward, but hopefully this is worthwhile for some people. So we can see we have pretty even defenses here on these numbers, right? Right? So then you got to think, okay, so what's the value here? Elf, you have D-spec based builds, which means it's cheap, easy to rebuild, all that jazz. However, you've got to deal with a little bit of plus wages, but you've got bonus WPA, and you've got minus casualties, and you've got bonus mana. So you're casting, 2 mana WPA. Here we've got, all we really got is 25 TPA, no T losses. Fairy, we've got all the spells. So, Halfling, you can do it, but, as soon as you want to start pushing 8 TPA, as soon as you realize that you're fireballed down to 2 peasants per acre because you're a halfling, it's getting a little rough. But, you can see that raw DPA numbers looking pretty even there. So it comes down to what you think about the other bonuses the race gets, Fairy's gonna get Mage's Fury. Fairy has extra mana. Fairy has extra duration. So Fairy, crazy good caster. Elf, crazy good caster. And its bonuses aren't quite as tied to Mystic as Fairy is. So you can run Elf sort of as anything. Halfling, I think you're really only getting the max value as a rogue. Halfling rogue, you've got to deal with having maybe a little bit weak wizards. You're going to get cast on more. You're going to lose that honor. But in the ideal world, I think your halfling's looking the strongest. I think in almost all practical senses, you're looking at Elf as easiest to execute with the highest strength, and Fairy is something in the middle where it's a little bit harder to execute because you have to keep those elites, but you're not nearly as fragile as I'd say as a halfling. So, you know what? At the end of the day, I expected these numbers to be a little bit different, but off the cuff, they turned out just fine. So, I'd say if anything, I actually underestimated what the halfling defense would be here, so not so bad. Alright. don't need to save that. No, we don't need to save that. Alright. Alright, let's go to the attacking. This is the fun stuff, everybody. Avians, we are essentially unchanged in terms of bonuses, but we did lose Town Watch. That's important, because with 60% birth rate, with these military casualties, means you're almost certainly building hospitals. With the general build space Avian has, because they don't need barracks, they don't need stables, you tend to have homes. You've got homes and hospitals and birth rate all stacking, which is great. Who doesn't love a bunch of free peasants? The problem is, well, you get hit by an orc 6 times, you're a third your starting land, and now you've got infinity peasants to deal with. So I think avians are going to hurt a lot if they're chained and they can't properly mitigate. If they're not fireballed first, if their army returns are a long time, they don't have enough land incoming, stuff like that. Is there ways to mitigate? Sure, you can work on it, but I'd say avian is pretty fragile in that way. I chained a lot of avians that had 50, 60,000 peasants when I started chaining them, and if they didn't have Town Watch, I don't think they'd have had a single military unit left. So, there's a lot of give and take there. I'll mention again, Avian gained 1 offense point, and that is significant. When you have offense that can break TMs and can multi-tap enemy core and that level of attack time, you become pretty scary. So I wouldn't discount avians. I think they did get a significant buff just trading offense for Town Watch. I just think that there's a lot more room to screw up as an avian and lose a lot when chained. Okay, and then Skybound Strike. Essentially, what this does is you can do half a hit. If you send 50% offense at someone, it does half of a hit. It does a massacre, it does a raise, it does a trad, it does a learn. It's half a hit. You can do it once a day. So for avians, that's going to be 1 attack every 3 waves in war. You can do half a massacre on a TM, which is incredibly strong. I think people that beat avians are going to hate themselves because they're going to get massacred even, no matter what. You can't be safe. So I think avians are actually the real TM killers here. People can talk about dwarves, and we'll get to dwarves. People can talk about orcs, and we'll get to orcs. I think avians are the scariest TM killer in the game. This is like bounce raising on steroids. This is like if bounce raising also did a massacre. It's pretty bonkers to me. So yeah, avian seems extremely strong. There's a lot of things you don't have to deal with, like peasants, ambush, clear sight. These are all great things. Greater protection is pretty modestly powerful. So yeah, they really got the whole package this age. They got a bonus to offense, which you always love as an attacker, and a huge bonus specifically against TMs. So yeah, I could see some very powerful avians this age. Also, we'll see that the numbers on orc make orc look very strong, and one of the ways to counter a really strong slow orc with crazy numbers is attack speed. If you can just chain 3 orcs for every 2 people the orcs chain, you can run through them really fast. So I think avians sort of got the whole package now, because they're always going to beat other cores with that attack time. They've got this sort of scaling long-term war bonus with birth rate. And now they've got this sort of permanent in-the-bag way to deal with enemy TMs. So, we'll see. Dark Elf we went over. Dwarf. Dwarf is unchanged as far as I know. Exact same everything. They just gained Earthshaker. So Earthshaker gives you a mini raise on one attack. Once every 24 hours. Honestly, I'd have preferred this ability if it was just a 5% raise on all attacks and it was a passive, because I think that could be pretty fun when just trading hits with enemy core. But the 5% once a day on one hit is essentially meaningless, so you're only really looking at raising forts once a day. Which means if you can break a TM, you can raise all their forts, which is usually going to drop their defense 20%. So it's sort of like an auto plague on a TM. So yeah, 20% defense off a TM. You do have to be able to break, so you're going to need the offense as a dwarf somehow. You don't necessarily have it built in, but you break a TM, it's lower defense, now everyone else can break a TM. So we see here the main ability of Dwarf is a way to screw TMs over. The main ability of Avian is a way to screw TMs over. What do TMs get? TMs get bonus damage. This is going to be mostly used on core, right? You don't really do many fireballs on other TMs. I mean, a little bit, but yeah. Elf, we already talked about. 50% mana is insane ability. It's basically plus 2 mana a tick. Elf got buffed crazily. Pick elves. Fairy, very slightly nerfed, otherwise essentially the same, but their Mystic Vortex ability is crucial. You're going to want one or two of them just for that alone. Halfling, I'd say about the same as last age. I think the population and despec nerf cancel each other out. So certainly the strongest thief. I think their ability is super useful, but only, again, if you're doing propaganda, if you're doing assassinate wizards, and those aren't things you usually do to core, those are things you do to other TMs. And honestly, 90% of Utopia is night striking and chaining core. Only 10% of it is doing stuff to TMs. So while an amazing ability, it's an anti-TM ability attached to a TM. So I'd go either way on this. Again, if you end up with halfling rogues that make it through the first 48 hours of war, they're going to start to do really awful things to enemy fairies and elves, but for the first 48 hours, there's nothing special going on for them. And I think they're going to scale a fair bit worse just because elves and fairy just gain access to a lot more mana, which means a lot more honor, which is just scaling you better with TM output and population and income and stuff. But in the longer wars, you have to watch out for those halflings because they'll start to honor farm your TMs. Humans! Now this is exciting. I love these humans, just gonna say it. If we look based off last age, we've lost 5% science efficiency. You can't run libraries, which is, yeah, kind of poopy. You know, last age, sure, I was running about 10 libraries, but that's all. It's, you know, it's another 10% SE, but it's another 10% build space that you get back. And what we really have here is this really interesting penalty. Minus 80% magic effectiveness on defense. Now, we all sort of assume that that just means everyone succeeds all the time. I'll tell you that your core is still going to fail more than you want it to, but it's not going to be like you fail more than a third ever. So it is sort of like 100% success casting on humans. And that sounds strong, but Fireball has a lot of diminishing returns, you know? Fireballing someone from 8 to 2 PPA is fine. Fireballing someone from 2 to 1.5 TPA really doesn't do a lot. Neither does from 2 to 1. Because every hit, they're going to gain back 1 PPA. They have a lot of science. They have bonus income built in. They're going to pay their wages. They're going to recast Reflect Magic over and over and over, and you have to deal with that every time you want to fireball them, every time you want to amnesia them. It can't just be, oh, I'm throwing fireballs. You have to do everything in a run with a Mystic Vortex while they're offline. For a lot of people, that's tough. Fireball doesn't kill units, it's only killing peasants. Amnesia doesn't kill units, it's temporary science damage. So it's really hard to just kill a province with only magic. And other than that, they don't really have any weaknesses. Their offensive numbers are unchanged from last age. I ran a full core of humans. I was able to break TMs almost any time I needed to. You've got more science than anyone by a lot. 30% science effectiveness, plus the changes to extreme activity bonuses, plus their unique ability, which I'll talk about, plus Fountain of Knowledge. It's sort of like having double the books of everyone else, but without paying that net worth cost to it. And this Reflect Magic, to me, is a godsend for these humans. So, I don't think humans got nerfed that much. Granted, everything else got buffed. I don't think humans got nerfed, and humans were obviously overpowered last stage. So, we don't have shepherds, so the most overpowered human isn't around, but human cleric is still there. You're going to have Rev, you're going to have a lot of good spells and minus damage to casting. You still got Tactician, which is what I ran last stage, and while you're not immune to dragons, it's not that hard to slay dragons these days. So, yeah. Unique ability to human interest, you get an extreme activity bonus extra once a day. So that's equivalent to a 4% science efficiency buff if you use it every day. So essentially they didn't even lose science efficiency. The way activity bonuses work on the 24-hour income cycle means that it's probably gonna be higher income than their current income in war. I would assume everyone's income's sort of trending downward. It's going to be really good for dragon funding. It's going to be really good for preparation. The whole enemy human core could sit without using that, and then when they have a button, they all press it, and suddenly there's all this money. And, they have no offensive magic penalties, so they're going to be able to land less better. They're actually going to have the highest offensive WPA of any core. They'll probably have higher offensive WPA than even elves, I would say, by the mid to late age. So I'd say humans are scary. They're not going to keep any honor, of course, and that is a bit of a problem. That does stop them from scaling insanely with something like War Hero, which I think was possible for a lot of other people. So I'd say humans crazy strong. You're gonna have to find the right personality you use it with. You're gonna have to build a bit of a strategy around it, but I think humans are a sleeper pick. I think a lot of people are gonna discount them and they're gonna be wrong, so watch out for humans. But again, I'm saying Avian stronger than last stage, Dwarf stronger than last stage, both better at countering TMs. Now you got a human in there that seems pretty strong. Orcs. Orcs got buffed like crazy. Orcs gained 30% science efficiency. That's effectively 40% offensive military casualties. 25% draft cost. And all they took from it, and they even gained elite, they also gained 12% defense from an 8 to 9 increase on D-Spec. So if you watch my revised video, I made a bit of a point on how many major buffs orcs just got, and it's still true. You do have minus 20% credits on attacks, but you're actually gaining more building credits because you're gaining more land. You have more than 20% additional offense over other races, so you're still probably getting the same amount of spec credits, and your spec credits are up to 40% better than other people's. You're getting bonus kills from Bloodlust and just having more offense. No, you gotta, it used to be you had to train 25% more D-specs to keep defense in line with other people. Now you really only need to add 1 extra D-spec per acre. You also get your mini plunders when you attack. It's not huge, but it's a little bit. Helps pay the bills, minus 25% offensive military casualties. They also appear home instantly. End of the day, if you have base 7% offensive casualties, 25% of that's coming home. It's only like a 2% offensive refund. So, that's less significant than just the, prisoners you get on offense. So, it's mostly just minus offensive military casualties with a little extra flavor. I don't think the fact that they come home instantly is that big. But whatever. Lets you double dip if you're a tactician waving through dragon. That's what we'll say. So, yeah, Orc, I say just by the numbers, is by far the strongest racial pick. It's the strongest core. It's got the most offense. It has no penalties whatsoever. It has substantial bonuses. So I would say everyone's picks should revolve around how do we beat orcs? How do we secure TMs? How do we beat TMs? In that order. If you can't beat orcs, you just can't war orcs, right? Unless you have a plan for orcs, the plan can't just be, we'll do what we always do. Because if you do that without orcs, you're going to lose to orcs. They just have more offense than you. They hit you 30% harder with 20% more offense. And their sustain is out of this world. So, anyways, Orc's very strong. I would say Orc is probably overpowered. It probably beats every other race in essentially every other role. But they're not fast. And they're not tanky. So if you can chain them quickly, they'll struggle a bit. Dryads. 10% OME, 10% DME. Wages are always paid. This just means if you can't pay wages, you pay wages. But otherwise, that's it. How I would use this if I thought Dryad was otherwise pretty strong would be to pump on 40% homes before war, way overdraft, train way too much, raise your homes, straight up just go to 0 homes, and run 200% wages, and you'll have 0 GC the entire war. You'll never get a single tick of income, but you'll have, just more military than everyone else, and you won't really have to care. It's weird, but that's how I would see Dryad being their strongest. And with effectively an 11-point D-spec, if you overdraft and overtrain D-specs, and you run 25% watchtowers, you're going to be really hard to chain, really hard to kill, and you're going to have more than enough offense to crush people. You're effectively running a 16.5 offense elite, which is not quite as strong as Orc, but it's 10% more offense than you're going to expect from dwarves or avians. So, very strong. Their ability to kill 1% of the population per successful attack. I don't think that's actually that strong. Um, in my head, it's like you're doing an extra maybe 20% offensive military casualties. It takes 15 to 20 hits for it to be as effective as a single massacre. This is not how you spell wizards. Or peasants. Jeez. Or thieves. Can somebody just use like a basic word check? Anyways, spell check. So, I just don't think it matters much. And in a way, it's kind of funny because, I mean, this is going to proc the most when you're hitting, like, deep training someone. You're hitting them repeatedly. You're bottom feeding, whatever. And in that situation, at best, what you're getting out of it is more offensive kills than you'd otherwise get. But that's about it. So, I'm not particularly scared of this. And while their base numbers are pretty good, they otherwise don't have anything, right? You can have big numbers, big elite with big D-spec. You don't really have any other bonuses. So to me, it just sort of feels like a worse orc. Um, but yeah, I think in a situation where you can overtrain, Holmes pump, whatever, suddenly the Dryad are feeling pretty nice. Because if you're in a situation where the other side has to drop wages to 100, say, and you don't, that's a 12% military swing, and that gets pretty scary. Uh, it's hard to build elites, so if you're mixing elites with O specs, suddenly your massive offensive numbers that you're mostly scared of aren't there. So you end up with this sort of highly defensive but still modest offense core, but it's got weaknesses. So I think Dryad's probably the weakest attacking race, but not by a lot. I'd say they're probably about the same level as human and dwarf, but not quite as strong as orc or even avian. Gnomes, I guess I didn't include them when I talked about TMs or when I talked about attackers. It's just because they suck. The foods thing is fine if you're doing food things. They're going to be insanely tanky if they're running pure elites. They're going to be insanely tanky when they're running half elites, half D-specs. I just don't really care. Like, someone can run numbers and say if they're good. Anyways, they got 20% population, and they do bonus enemy kills, and it's a substantial amount, and they can have a fair bit of offense, they can have a fair bit of defense, but they're just gonna get crushed by spells. They're gonna have no peasants. They're gonna have no defense after 24 hours just from meteor showers alone. They're gonna be paying a crazy amount of wages on their bonus population with this. So I'm just gonna discount gnomes outside of micro kingdoms and say that almost anything a gnome wants to do, a halfling can do just about as good. Sorry if people are excited for that. I've run plus population races that have crushed ages before, and this just isn't doing it for me. If even one of these numbers had a 10 in it, I might see it, but to me this just looks like someone's gonna get crushed. Now maybe you run like a gnome necro or heretic or mystic, and you can dodge, core versus core casting. You're still gonna get cast on by mystics. Maybe you dodge most of the fireballs doing that. But then I don't know if you're just I don't know if you're outperforming other core. Like, just with fat numbers, you're gonna get Night Striked, you're gonna get Fireballed. Like, you'd have no protections. And you're gonna run out of build space, right? You don't have attack speed. You have to run like 20% stables to mount all your offense. You need a bunch of watchtowers to not get Night Striked. You probably want hospitals and TGs, and it's like you run out of build space. You're not going to have good building efficiency. You're not a dwarf. You're not that tanky. You're not anything. Now, you could probably do net worth abuse out of war with soldier armies and stuff like that, but you could probably run a lot of gnomes with a lot of offense and just rely on killing people. Like, sort of run like Last Age's war heroes would have run. Maybe there's a play there. I'd say if there's a play, it probably comes down to utilizing the military casualties more than anything else. But, yeah, I'm just not loving gnomes. I don't really see their role. And I don't think sitting on 25 EPA is going to do it. I mean, you can do it. You'll have raw 200 plus OPA and DPA, and you'll basically be unbreakable, but then what? Oof. Artisans are unchanged. This ability is either worth unlimited credits for free, or it's worth 4% building refund. So, between those two options, either way, it's just not great design, I don't think. I think Artisans plenty strong. We've had them essentially unchanged for many ages. I think everyone knows what makes Artisans good. The problem with Artisans is mostly that you're slow, nothing happens quickly, you're just a big ball. It's like being an artisan is sort of like being a gnome. You know, the numbers are there, but how do you use the numbers in an effective way? I wouldn't say a lot of people have an answer to that question. The only people I've seen run effective artisans is like Barco, and usually what they're doing is they're running like 20% barracks on their artisans, and they're just treating them like avians. And that can work. You can run them specifically for super intel. I've done that in the past. It's pretty fun. You can run them just because you make a lot of money in runes, and you're sort of like a weird cow. It's been done, but nothing too fancy happening there. With all the other weird fancy bonuses, just the fact that they got such a sad passive is a little disappointing. Oh, Necromancer. This is going to get me in the most fights. I think Necromancer is bad. It says undeads here. Anyways. 15 WPA is their only bonus, which is just not that amazing, because we know for a fact you can get better numbers on Heretic and on Mystic and on Rogue in terms of bonuses. So you're only picking Necromancer for access to Nightmare, and like we've only been picking Heretics the last few ages for access to Nightmare, and Heretics in the past were better than Necros are now, so I just don't see it. And, you know, our last two ages, I would say that none of Land or Honor Crown's success came directly from Heretics. Honor Crown the last two ages both had 0 Heretics. This age's Land Crown had 1 Heretic. Last age's Land Crown, who remembers and who cares? 5% casualties into Wizards is not a lot. Also, getting soldiers and peasants in small numbers is not a lot. Can you do things to leverage this? Sure. You can, but think of it, we've had prisoners convert into elites before. When you attack someone, 66% of their casualties are prisoners for you, which, you know, over time convert 100% into it's been specs, it's been elites. So when we're thinking that in the past we've had 66% casualties turn into elites, and this province gets you 30% casualties into specs or into soldiers and peasants, and 5% into wizards, like, I'm just not seeing it. It's true that you'll get wizards as an attacker, as a necromancer, that no one else is getting over time during war, out of war. You're stacking in a few wizards here and there, it's no doubt, but I think just having stronger wizards or more wizards in pump is just going to do better. Like if you just went artisan and built more guilds than Necros built, like you're just going to have the same WPA, man. So I think Necromancer's only here for nightmares, and you're only wanting nightmares this age because there's some instances where there's going to be tanky cores you need to drop the defense on a bit, and there's some instances where it's going to be really important to be hitting people 4 times instead of 2 or 3 times, but it's expensive, man. Nightmare's expensive, and I don't mean the runes, I mean the cost to your kingdom setup. So, that's probably the thing people will disagree with me the most, because I've heard a lot of people really love Necro, and I don't see it at all. Cleric. Cleric got a huge buff, because they gained Illuminate Shadows, they gained a -1 self-spell mana cost, and 50% more spell duration on average. So, Cleric was probably the most picked personality last stage. Whoa, my camera's going crazy. 1 second, let's maybe just turn that off a bit. All right. So I think actually Cleric's been overbuffed. I think it was plenty strong last stage. It was just overshadowed by how strong Shepherd was. I think with the removal of Shepherd and possibly a slight nerf to Tactician and the fact that Warrior is reworked and sort of terrible, Cleric's incredibly strong now, and Cleric also directly tackles some of the biggest issues with multiple core. Cleric giving plus defense to any of Elf, Avian, Orc, Dryad is super strong value. Gaining Illuminate Shadows and Divine Shield, super good value. Less instant damage is going to be really important for gnomes and for humans. Science on humans. So I think Cleric's strong, and I think every race can pick Cleric as an attacker straight up. So I think Cleric's very good. I think you should consider Cleric strongly in your setups. But there's not much to say. It's a lot of mitigation. It's basically -20% everything damage, casualties, spells, thieves. It's, a little bit cheaper mana. It's all sorts of things. Heck, run Fairy Cleric. You can cast 2 Tree of Golds a tick. Why not? Heretic. Heretic lost its damage. It gained TPA, WPA that's not science-based, so it's going to be a lot stronger early age. It's going to even out mid-age. I'd say by end of age, on average, it's a slight nerf to their TPA, WPA, but they're going to get steamrolling a bit quicker. If you can consider a bonus that maybe doesn't scale, but it does give you, say, +1 honor rank, maybe that's exaggerating, you can add that into your calculations, and it's pretty strong. So you're losing 20% damage on thieves and on wizards. or instant spells. You're losing those unique spells of Nightmare and Fool's Gold. You're gaining a fair bit of thief power, plus 25% off the bat's pretty strong. And then their unique passive is any failed offensive spell cast, and you should specialize or specify that this does not include Crystal Ball. The Heretic recovers 5% stealth. So in theory, you can convert 2% mana and some runes into 5% stealth. So for your average Heretic, you're turning 3 mana into 7 stealth, and so you're effectively gaining 0 mana and 10 stealth a tick. So in a way, that's like doing triple thief damage. And, maybe you're the kind of rogue that gets massacred a lot and you just never have wizards. Maybe Heretic's the pick for you. You don't really care about how good your wizards are, and you can just do a buttload of Night Strike. Now, you're not getting that plus 20% damage, so your 10 stealth has the value of someone else's 8 stealth, but that's still twice as much stealth as a rogue. Right? So, I see Heretics in an interesting spot. I specifically envision them almost exclusively casting fireballs on enemy mystics, or whoever their high honor TM is. That's hard to break with wizards, and every time you succeed, great, you're going to gain a ton of honor because you're casting on their top honor provinces. You're going to gain pretty good value because you're fireballing usually one of their top peasants and someone that otherwise considers themselves safe. And the fact that you're failing 60, 70, 80, 90% of those casts suddenly doesn't matter because it just turns into you night striking harder. So I think Heretic has a really interesting value proposition in that circumstance. I think in almost every other circumstance, I just prefer a rogue. But it's interesting. It's, as much as I like rogues, again, rogues are doing 90% night strikes on enemy core. And so the fact that they have a lot of TPA and they have access to these other ops sort of matters a little less. And maybe if you just replace those rogues 1-to-1 with heretics, maybe you're just doing 50% more night strikes on core and you're just gonna win. So consider that for heretics. I think that's possibly strong. Maybe it's not as good. Nobody really knows. We'll try our best. I tried to add back my camera and it didn't seem to work. Okay. Mystic. Essentially unchanged Mystic, except we gained access to Fool's Gold. So I'm pretty against that change because, that was sort of the thing you needed a Heretic for. Now everyone always has Fool's Gold and it's always on your strongest casters. I think it takes a lot of tactical and strategic decisions away from everyone and just says, great, now no one has safe gold ever. Which is fine. If you lower the dragon prep of people with changes like this, it does balance things a little bit, and you should consider that with your race and personality picks. But everyone having access to Fool's Gold and having access to Fool's Gold on your top mana with extra mana regen, I don't think I love that decision, but it's there. Keep it in mind. It's a pretty substantial buff to everyone. I mean, it's just a buff to Mystic, but everyone always had Mystics, so it's sort of just like a fundamental mechanic change more than a buff or nerf. Yeah. Yep. They also have toggleable offensive converts. This is pretty strong for some hybrid mystics. Keep that in mind. I think things like avian mystics and whatever, any sort of hybrid mystic, even mystics that'll eventually be pure TMs, get a benefit from this if they want to run hybrid in the early age. So, yeah, just a straight buff to Mystic. Righteous Defender turning D-Specs into elites when you attack is really weird. I guess if I played Genesis, I'd understand how it works a bit more, but I don't love it. You know, if you're 50% D-Specs and 50% elites as a fairy, you're going to get hit, and you gain some free elites, and that's nice. If you're a halfling or elf mystic, you're going to lose 20% of your offense when you get tratted, but suddenly gain offense? So I could see situations where you're getting hit a few times, you're sort of on the cusp of unbreakable. You might intentionally convert a few elites so you can, like, hit back a bit. But otherwise, I don't really see... Like, and if you're a hybrid or an attacking mystic, you can turn your D-Specs into elites. So, like, if you were an orc mystic, you could turn your D-Specs into elites and become, like, some sort of weird suicider. I think it's very weird. I'm sure it's got value. I'm sure it makes more sense in Genesis, where there's a lot more defensive elites, because a lot of the personalities in Genesis have, like, bonuses to the elite counts, and you can turn any elite into a defensive elite if you pick Mystic. So I think it works more in Genesis. I think in World of Legends, I just think Righteous Defender is almost always bad for everyone always, and someone's going to cast it and not realize that they just suicided their province. Like, legitimately, some halfling is going to accidentally click Righteous Defender once before they're massacred, and then they're going to lose like 20% of their defense, and the dwarf that hit them's going to raise all their forts, and they're just going to tank like a rock. Otherwise, Mystic, minor buff, basically unchanged. Mystic's very strong. Everyone always picks Mystics always, because you need meteor showers. I think Mystic's overtuned with all the spells they've been getting. I'm happier with a Mystic that just has meteor showers. Like, do they need a bonus 50% wizards and 4 spells that you would normally consider special racial spells or personality spells all on them? I don't think so, but whatever. It's not like I'm the only one getting it or not getting it. Everyone's getting it, so everyone gets super mystics. And, you know, I can't really complain about TMs getting some things, because we saw our attackers are all getting some pretty strong anti-TM powers. Rogues! Rogues are unchanged, but they get plus 25% op damage if they have over 50% stealth. Does that mean that all rogues are going to run 50% stealth all the time? Probably not. Exposed Thieves is not that hard to cast. It lasts a long time. So I'd say, other than on Declare, where that first 50% rogue stealth is going to be worth 63% rogue stealth, it's not going to come into play much. If you're in a situation where the enemy has rogues you can't cast on, or you're out of mana, well, that could be a problem, because now all the rogues do 25% more damage, but I don't think it's a crazy bonus. But if unaddressed, if you're not keeping up ET and stuff, like, yeah, you're just giving rogues 25% more damage, and that's pretty scary. So, it's certainly a buff. It's a free buff. It didn't cost them anything, but I don't think it's going to be terribly impactful most of the time. It does also mean that out of war, rogues just steal 25% better pretty much all the time, so keep that in mind also. It's going to be tough. Tacticians. Tacticians lost Dragon Immunity. Instead, they have Dragon's Wrath, their new unique passive. 10% of your raw offense will also deal damage to the dragon. When calculating this, I made a mistake, so keep in mind raw offense. This means this is not your combined elite damage to dragon. You're not getting 15 plus 3 as an orc, you're getting just that 15. So my math is if you have 10 elites per acre on 15 tacticians, one full wave is going to kill somewhere between 2/3 and 80% of a dragon, which is a lot. But it means you'd have to wave through dragons. So if that's a ruby, you're chaining 15% worse. You're not able to break enemy TMs. If it's an emerald, it means you're doing less gains, you're taking more damage, etc., etc. So this buffs rubies and emeralds quite a bit against tacticians. Sapphire dragons, you can just basically ignore and let your tacticians wave through it because it doesn't affect much. So in a way, this makes anti-core dragons on tacticians a lot stronger. But if your main fear is a sapphire dragon, I think tacticians are really happy. So something to think about. If you're against a tactician kingdom and you're sending sapphires, they're just going to get killed for free, more or less. So something to think about. I like that idea a lot. I tanked a lot of sapphire dragons last age. So in theory, if I picked the exact same setup and people continued to only send sapphires at me, maybe tactician's literally stronger in last age. But in basically all other situations, yeah, they lost that dragon immunity. Tactician, however, insanely strong. Credits are really high value these days, ever since the changes to Fireball and Chastity, and just the meta in general, I think, has led to a point where credits are a lot more valuable than they used to be, so that's a really good buff. No Thief lost on Intel. I don't think I need to tell anyone here that's ever played any core how lovely that feels. Attack speed is probably the best bonus for attackers in the game, so very strong there. All-around tacticians, extremely strong. And with the, I'm not going to say removal of warrior, but with the massive nerf to warrior, I think tactician is your go-to core pick. Of course, you can look at cleric and the war heroes we'll see, but there's nothing wrong with tactician. You should definitely pick it if you don't care and you just want something good and you don't want, conditional things where it's like, well, war hero is good if you don't want to deal with that, just pick tactician. Yeah. War hero. Plus 30% honor gains. Oh, that's honor gains, eh? I just assumed that was honor bonus power. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Plus 30% honor gains, minus 30% honor losses. I've heard that this is supposed to be all honor gains and losses, i.e., this is ops, spells, and hits, rather than just hits. Plus 5% military efficiency in war, converts, and you, as their unique active war trophies, for 12 hours at a time, every 24 hours, you can get double boners. Double boners, yes. Double boners. That's what you can get, everybody. Double bonuses from your honor. I think just looking at this, I thought it would be stronger with the plus 30% honor effects, because that would be stacking with the double honor bonus, and I thought that would end up being sort of broken. With it just being honor gains, I think it's still pretty strong. I'd say this is more like your new warrior. Turn this 5% ME global into something that's closer to plus 10% OME, turn this double honor bonus ability into sort of like plus 5% OME, and now you've got plus 15% offense, and you're a warrior. So yeah, I think War Hero is extremely strong. You need to be built in a way to gain honor. As a core, generally the only way to do that is to attack faster and a lot. So Avian War Hero sounds very strong to me. If you can find a pick that can gain honor also through another means, like casting or thieves, that's good too. It's going to be slower. It's going to be, like, if you pick... recently I was a solo pitfall casting elf, and I ended up actually getting to, like, count and almost V-count, or marquee, just casting pitfalls and being sort of a tanky core. So you can gain a fair bit of honor, but once you lose the honor, you tend to lose all of it in that situation. Like, as soon as you get chained once, it's sort of all bye-bye. So, yeah, actually, I think War Hero's pretty strong. Probably even I'd prefer War Hero to Cleric in a lot of situations, now that I think about it. I'd say if you want attack speed, always go Tactician. If you don't want attack speed, pretty often you want to go War Hero. Now, my assumption is that you're winning 75% of your wars and having 5 or 6 wars. If that's not you, then suddenly these honor things mean a lot less. So, yeah, I don't know. I think War Hero's pretty strong. If you have any illusions about getting Honor Crown, you have to have a War Hero core. You will 100% have more honor as a War Hero core than a non-War Hero core over time. In the past, I've likened it to being it's like being a sage, except rather than pumping science, you're pumping wars. Every day you're in war as a War Hero, these 2 bonuses will just scale you ever so slowly up in honor. So, yeah, I'm actually, on reading this, I'm even happier with the War Hero. I wonder even if it might be a bit too strong. It has to compete with Tactician, so yeah, very nice. Warrior, this is very sad to me. You just traded 15% offense for a general and some merc prisoner strength. Their buff being only 6 hours every 24 days sort of means like 1 out of every 2 waves. Which is, 50% of the time you get 5% more offense. You can use it to try and bounce people, like having an extra cast of greater protection. But, if you're not using the extra general, and that extra general is somehow more valuable than, say, 15% attack speed, I'm not seeing the huge bonus on Warrior here. What Warrior's gonna do is really allow exactly 6 people on the server to have a really good time with soldier armies. Like, human warrior with aggression and a lot of tactics science and enough gold to max out mercenaries, and is going to be running like, a 5 offense soldier with a 12 offense mercenary and like plus 50% OME science, and it's like, great, now your soldiers are as strong as other people's O-specs. Great. But otherwise, I don't think your average war or growth kingdom actually wants to run warrior. One general can be extremely strong in the trenches. Other than that, I'm not loving it. So, if you're facing an orc warrior after you're both chained, yeah, he'll probably 5 times you for 80% of your land, and you'll rage quit. But if that's not happening, I don't think Warrior's that strong. Anyways, we went a little longer than normal, hour 15. I sort of love the changes. Going into this, my thoughts were I see strong use cases for every race and personality except Dark Elf is very niche, Dryad's very niche, and I consider Halfling worse than either Elf and Fairy. Maybe I've changed my mind a little bit on Halfling. And the balance on personalities, I think's pretty good. I think Artisan deserved something a little better with their unique passive. I think people are overhyping Necro. I think people might not realize how strong Cleric is because last age it was overshadowed. I think Heretic is a little iffy. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I think it could be very strong. I think it could be underwhelming. I think it's going to come down to the user a lot. And I think Warrior's sad. I think having no overt plus OME pick is a little lame because sometimes you just really want to break someone that has a lot of defense and you're making it harder on me. So anyways, that was me ranting. I'm Smiles. Sorry if I was coughing and sniffing a little bit. My throat's a little dry, but hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you for listening, and as always, hit me up on Discord. Ciao.